Well, thank you all for taking the time to check in. Feel like it helps me feel more present here with all of you as we open up time to share a bit of Dharma in this topic of the book that we're reading here together, Transcending, around trans Buddhist experiences. Yeah, I feel like I'm feeling nervous tonight. So I think in part because I'm sharing somewhat personally. So just kind of owning that tonight so that I can be more present with you all. But yeah, I felt like as I thought about what I wanted to share as part of starting to read this book, I really wanted to reflect a little bit on my own experience with gender as it's evolved over time. I feel like reading this first chapter here in the book, What is a Body Anyway, Form, Deep Listening, and Compassion on a Buddhist Trans Path by Finn and Kei, just really was like a good space for me to explore, what is my body? What is gender in relationship to my body? And how have I evolved in my own identification over time? So, and I really appreciate the Sangha being like excited and interested and willing to dig in to these topics. Certainly we're in a political climate where it's, there's a lot of control, silencing, violence towards trans people. And so it feels meaningful and important, certainly for people I care about and probably for myself as well, to just really, turn our attention towards care and support there. So I feel like I'm going to kind of talk through some of my own experiences. Hopefully they will come together as a coherent experience as a listener. But I think my overall question is like, when is it relevant to kind of think of our form, our body as a gendered experience? When does that keep us separated? And how do we even make sense of that for ourselves? And rather than choosing between form or emptiness, knowing that those are just like places to discern between when is it helpful to be more of a form and when is it helpful to be connected into emptiness. So a little bit of my evolving story. I appreciated that as Finn opened their chapter in really being interested in Buddhism as a philosophy and a spiritual practice as a young person, they asked, is there any way I can make this arbitrary physical stuff of the body just matter less? Like, can it just go away? And that felt really familiar to me. I know that I felt very trained as growing up to be very disconnected from my body. That felt particularly true in my social location as a white person, assigned female at birth. My training since childhood is really to hate my body, to just be like, my body shape is wrong, my body size is wrong, like how it's organized is wrong. Just like that's the intense training that I got. And so in that, like I've really yet to meet someone who feels like they really identify as some kind of ideal body. Everyone kind of has their ways that actually, that's not true. I saw Lizzo this last week say that she's like, I think I am like the new person who can be the ideal. She's like, why not? Why am I not the ideal? As a Black fat woman, she was just like, I think I'm going to reclaim that title. But it felt like a rare exception rather than kind of how I relate to people or how I see people. And so, you know, from that, my gender assigned at birth as a woman, as a girl, you know, really tried to teach me that I was wrong kind of for however I exist. And so, yeah, I feel like in that case, like society's goal was really not to have me feel in integrity or feel loved in any way as the body that I was in. Often society's goal was kind of to keep me a little bit off kilter, panicked, trying to buy some solution for what's supposedly incorrect in my life. So that feels like one piece. It's just really the ways that my conditioning really has taught me to be disconnected from my body. And so with this deep disconnection, I really struggled to connect with my body when I tried to show up in mindfulness practice. When I first showed up to a Dharma center to just try out mindfulness, I'd been reading about it, I'd been reading Buddhism for some years, but actually to practice breathing and mindfulness, that invitation was really to focus in on my breath and understand what's happening with that experience. Notice how it moved in and out of this body. And it was really challenging for me. Like I could tolerate it if I was in Sangha, but if I tried to practice at home, I literally felt doubled over in panic within like 8 minutes. It just really was something that was extremely challenging for me. It just felt like a new way to be panicked about my body rather than something that supported me. So I was glad to speak about that sense of panic to one of my meditation teachers, Erin Treat, who's in Durango. I'm so glad I did, because she really could reassure me that a focus on the breath was not the only way to practice. And if it was really causing me a lot of stress rather than a sense of calm, I could try a different practice. Like there were many other things where I could really notice my experience. For me at that time, noticing sound felt safer. It sort of wasn't quite so inside of my body, but was something to still pay attention as it arose and passed away. And I really felt like her validation of my experience felt like this invitation to listen to myself first, rather than let the external instructions that I got about breathing decide how to do things. And especially in those early days, I felt really excited and enamored that this practice was one where I was really invited to see for myself what worked and what supported me towards freedom. There wasn't one way to do it. There were many pathways of really what could work for me. So I felt grateful to have some skillful means to start with mindfulness practice, kind of noticing sound that didn't completely panic or crush me. And yet, I still felt disconnected from my body, and that felt like something that I wanted to understand and learn more about, particularly as I continued to practice, and felt like a lot of folks found it helpful. So how do I connect in with it as well? So while I started practicing with sound, I also just kind of kept touching into practices around body and breathing to kind of get to know this body's experiences. And I'm glad I did. Like, I feel like, even though my body often feels a little unruly against many conditions, I've really found mindfulness of body to be like a particularly direct pathway towards liberation. So what does this have to do with our study on gender? For me, as a disembodied person who is becoming more embodied, gender identity has felt really evolving for me. It hasn't been one thing. And even as I become more mindful of my body, I'm still like, what is gender? Like, how is it that I can understand my own gender? I feel somewhat gender questioning sometimes. So what has been my pathway of trying to understand gender? I feel like there's probably places where I could start before this, but one particular place was around 7 or 8 years ago, probably around 2015. I was teaching with Buddhist Peace Fellowship and in leadership there. And that year we were teaching across the country in places like Albuquerque, Ann Arbor, Michigan, New Orleans, San Luis Obispo in Southern California, some smaller Dharma centers or just places that were outside of the Bay Area. And I started for myself including they, them pronouns alongside she, her. And my idea at the time, I'm not sure, I don't always know how much that's like premonition or but my idea at the time is that I was almost just offering it as like a leader or a teacher in places where that invitation to thinking about, well, what are your pronouns would be a new invitation. There were a lot of folks who hadn't ever thought about that before. And it felt like as a teacher in the space, including a broad range of pronouns was an opportunity for people to experience someone who had not only she, her, not only he, him pronouns, and just to think a little bit about for themselves, like who decided what my pronouns are and how do I make sense of that for myself? People would have questions that they maybe didn't have opportunity to ask elsewhere. And I felt like almost like a good ally to be able to support that being an inquiry in the trainings that we were doing. So it was probably like 2015. And when 2016 hit, November in particular, I had a really visceral moment of understanding like that I wasn't just an ally to this experience of gender queerness, like I actually had my own stake in this. And so November 2016, perhaps you understood I was pointing towards Trump being elected. And I remember particularly like sitting, I think I didn't go to work the next day, so maybe it was 2 days later, I had had a second job that I was going to in addition to Buddhist Peace Fellowship. And I went into the office and it was a lovely group of people, but mostly straight. Everyone was cisgendered. And I just was in the space and I was like, I feel scared, not of the people who were there, but of the political climate that we were moving into. I felt anxious that conditions were going to change in a way where the relaxed comfort I had around my own gender was all of a sudden going to start being policed. So I feel like it had been many years where I'd not shaved my legs. I think my beard hair was starting to grow in a way where I was like, I don't need to do anything about that. I can just let it be what it is. And because I lived here in the East Bay at the time and was pretty surrounded by people with a lot of different gender identities, I just hadn't really thought that hard about the importance of my own identity until that moment when I was like, what I have relaxed into is important to me. And there's not a going back to getting all shaped up and cleaning it all up. Like that just didn't feel like something I wanted to do or could do. Like it felt like it would attack me in a certain way. And I felt scared that I didn't know what kind of political climate we would move into and what limits that might push in my direction. So sometime in that next period, I found non-binary femme as a descriptor of how gender felt to me at that time. It still feels like a pretty good explanation. Gender queer also makes sense. I think I said gender questioning earlier because I'm like, I don't know, there's a lot of options. I think sometimes I feel unsure whether non-binary femme or genderqueer includes me in trans umbrella, kind of knowing that while there's places where I feel uncomfortable about how gender gets boxed in, I also feel like I have a lot of privilege in the ways that I show up in the world. And I think as pretty harsh policies come through, I don't feel as personally impacted by them, but I see them feel very impactful for people in my life and feel nervous about the kinds of violence that could be coming for me also. So I sometimes feel curious, like what gives me the authority to call myself transgender or, in Finn's question, like what is a body anyway? Like, what is it that makes this body a certain form? So I feel like this question about gender embodiment just continues to be an open question for me. Particularly as I find practices that support me towards further and further just embodiment in general and trying to understand how gender fits into that. I felt especially supported, in addition to mindfulness practices, with some training around generative somatics for much of the last 12 years also. And I find it to have a particular focus on connecting me with my body and trying to really understand how trauma and oppression get stored in our bodies in ways that then appreciate a certain kind of healing. I certainly would not be a mindfulness teacher without the support of generative somatics, and I don't know that I could have done much around that practice of embodiment and stuck with that healing without kind of the promise that deep liberation that feels offered here in Buddhism. So one of my favorite practices, kind of a core practice within generative somatics, is a centering practice of really kind of feeling into our whole bodies, like feeling the length, feeling the width, feeling the depth of our bodies. And one of my favorite practices is in trying to feel into the length is actually feeling a sense that I would have a tail, and not just any tail, but like a dragon tail. So I just invite you to like try to feel in, like, what am I talking about? Try to feel into that of like, that we have this tailbone, and what is it like to not just be held up by our two legs, but also this like third majestic, like balancing, feeling that tail be all the way to the length of the floor. I don't know, feel like I want to swing it around a little bit. Sometimes that gives me a little extra oomph. I know for me that invitation towards feeling that tail gives me a sense of groundedness beyond just being here in this body. I'm really feeling into the sense of like, okay, I have a certain form of body that's visible and seen, but what is it like to also feel into this more energetic body? It also can feel very present and have impact on how I'm showing up. Even just talking about it with you all right now, I feel more, I'm like, oh, okay, I should have just started there. But good to land here now. And so I had a special delight as I really think about dragons, reading Finn's take about Guan Yin or Kuan Yin, the Bodhisattva of compassion, who can appear as a dragon if that is what offers compassion and liberation. So I can read more of what they said there. If a living being needs to be saved by someone in the body of a Buddha, Guanxian will appear in the body of a Buddha. The Buddha then lists more than 30 different bodily manifestations of Guanxian according to what is needed. Some are male, some are female, some young, some old. They vary by class status and station and occupation. Some are divine, some are human, many are non-human. Guanxian will manifest in the form of a divine dragon, if that's what you need. Compassion manifests in all possible forms in order to reach all beings because we exist in form. It's not that Guanxian is really a man and puts on a dragon costume, nor is Guanxian really a woman and puts on a hummingbird costume. Rather, Avalokitesvara or Guanxian manifests non-duality, the way that everything in the universe is present in every cell, in every being, form and boundless together. So more I could share there, because I like to talk about dragons, but I also see that I just kind of want to open up space a little bit, maybe to some of the invitation here to really think about gender in our own bodies. I'm curious, some of my questions when I'm in this, and maybe for you as well, is knowing, I shared a little bit about my own social location and personal experience of like kinds of training I got around disembodiment. So I felt curious, just even like, what is this tension between disembodiment and embodiment for others? Given our different families, our different cultures, different social locations, where is that tension part of understanding our own bodies and how gender plays out there? I also feel curious as I kind of thought through my own experience, how much I felt very trained to ascribe to certain gender standards by modifying my own body around hair, like what's my haircut, am I shaving, all of these things. And so, just kind of curious how that is for you. Is gender just something that your body is, or are there modifications that you make to be more of a certain gender presentation? Why is that body modification feel more culturally acceptable than other body modifications people might choose to make? And yeah, what makes you know what your gender is? Is it one thing? Is it evolve over time? These are all questions that I have if folks are curious and thinking about this. So if anyone would like to share something on those questions, or really anything that is present here, we have a few minutes before closing up.
Hi. So with respect to gender, I really liked, I think I read it in the book when the description or suggestion was to feel ourselves in the middle way, somewhere in the middle way. And then I was reading teachings of a monk, and then I read that Buddha would advise that our bodies doesn't belong to us. So my body doesn't really belong to me. And this feeling of belonging is actually not right. And then so my question was, how does that reconcile with the identity and gender identity? There was just a little bit of clarification.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I mean, I think I feel like for me personally, that tension is just part of like being a body rather than being, you know, having both that sense of form and emptiness. Um, I know for me, being able to identify what my identity is, whether it's a gender identity, or identities around race or class or other things, are ways to actually just describe what it is that this form is, even as it is also an experience that is interconnected and beyond just my own personal experience. So I feel like my friend Sebene Selassie has written this great book called You Belong. And she talks about it as being both like, we are not the same, like we are unique, we have this experience while we're also all interconnected. And I've just really appreciated her teachings on, again, really being able to feel into that sense of, I can be both like this form and, a sangha, like that can be a sense of being interconnected right here in this space, which I'm just a part. I'm not the whole of that, but I'm also not absent from it.
I really enjoyed what you said about the dragon and your tail and stuff. That brought me so much joy. Because I was like, yeah, what if I had a tail? What would that be like? And yeah, I just really kind of connected to your journey. I think is something that I've shared myself in, like, why am I doing this stuff to my body? Like, what is it about these things that I'm doing, like, that kind of like attributes gender to myself? And so I guess, I stopped doing a lot of those things, and I think that really started opening the question of like what is gender to me? Like, how do I identify with gender? And yeah, like, like at the moment I don't use pronouns because I'm not sure what mine are. And so it's just this kind of like quite daunting space where I'm like, what actually do I put there? So I think hearing about your journey and the way that it's, you've kind of taken it step by step is really just encouraging to me, that, because I'm in those kind of beginning stages as well. So it's just like really comforting to kind of hear someone else talk about this stuff. So thank you.
Thank you for that reflection back. Helps me feel here, present in space.
Yeah, I wanted to just echo gratitude for your talk. Yeah, I think that one of the things in the reading, there was so much that Finn said, but that was really poignant was the part where they shifted the question of, do I want to put testosterone in my body, to how can I be present now? And just the way that you shared your journey over the course of your life and the different questionings that happened through all of your different stages of growth was really affirming, because the world wants us to be declarative and put ourselves into categories. And I think that it's a liberating thing to step back and say, if I renounce all of these definitions and identities, what is my experience right now? And then from that place, how can I connect to other people from like a place of deep belonging? And so, yeah, just your talk opened up so many things in that, and I'm just really grateful.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, Finn's, I also really appreciated that change in question from, can I put testosterone in my body, to what does this right here feel like? To be as present as I can be in my body and my experience of my body in this world. Yeah, that really spoke to me as well. Yeah, you're evoking for me one of my favorite quotes from Buckminster Fuller, who says, in universe time, the children are the elders. And it just, yeah, for me also, I feel like I've, as I have just explored my own journey and continue to learn from folks around me. Sorry, I see it was hard to hear the comment, and no, I think we could have done a better job on sound here. But yeah, Paul shared a bit about learning from your children and how much they have had just a real ease around gender since kindergarten or before, like they're not conditioned in the same way. So yeah, so then for me, that sense that next generations are conditioned in ways that we have, as we shift what that conditioning can look like, they have things to teach us. So I appreciate that as well. So yeah, the question is like, as we continue to learn about gender, and maybe we get called on to say, "Oh, you made a mistake there. Can you do that better?" I mean, I think a couple of things that I might share as someone who's also still learning. One, if I'm sharing and get someone's gender pronouns right and they correct me, I usually just say thank you and then try to use it almost immediately to try to get it in my head to be able to really start to integrate, like, what is this person's request and experience, not make a huge declaration about I try to do it right and how could I how I've done it so wrong. So I think kind of just keeping it simple is often a request that I hear from folks. But I've also, like, especially for people for whom maybe I've made that mistake in an ongoing way, maybe it's someone for whom I'm close with, and for whatever reason, it's like not getting in my brain. Then I do think like actually just practicing is really helpful for me to just be like let me get it on my tongue and in my mouth to use the pronouns that a person has requested from me. So that for me, it feels like for the folks close to me, really just not being afraid to practice so that I can be kind, be respectful of what people are needing. Well, thank you all for your presence here, and it's really good to be here with you all. I do like to close with a dedication of merit, letting this time together settle in, noticing wisdom that you'd like to just hold close here in your heart, letting go anything that didn't land, didn't feel needed, letting the wisdom that has arisen across us all together tonight, let that be wisdom that will support you, will support beloved people around you, will support trans and non-binary folks in all directions and all beings.